Good morning, everyone. This is Nathan Lindorf with The Rational Independent. Today's article, we are looking at The Independent off of Reddit, r/politics, and today's article is a wonderful example of gotcha journalism. A little soundbite and then run it into the ground. Drives me bonkers. It makes it worse because this is actually a substantive issue and is worthy of real debate. There are multiple sides. There are multiple sides to this issue, and each side needs to be represented as we come to a compromise solution that works. Headline: Republican lawmaker tells women to, quote, get off the abortion conversation, unquote, as future of critical drug in jeopardy. Before I get into the article itself, I want to give you just a high level of the issue that we're talking about. Roe v. Wade was overturned, therefore reverting the question of whether or not abortion is legal to the states. The challenge is there are many different ways to perform an abortion. One of the most common, particularly early on in pregnancy, is to use a combination of drugs to induce an abortion. The question then becomes, as we look at implementing the law that says certain states can allow abortion and certain states can't, is that if it's a states' right issue, then individual states should be able to choose how to regulate something. However, if I produce a drug that can induce an abortion, and I want to sell it to a consumer that's living in a state where abortion has been banned, now we have a situation where effectively we have the boundaries between the states are bleeding into each other. A state that chooses to ban abortion is unable to enforce that ban. Free interstate commerce enables an individual to get around the ban, effectively making it moot. There's a few interlocking pieces here, which is the drug in question, mifepristone, that's particularly concerned right now, was approved by the FDA for abortions up to 10 weeks. This was done in the year 2000, so it's been in place for quite some time, this FDA approval. The FDA is a federal oversight body. So if the FDA allows a drug to be used for this purpose, allows a doctor to prescribe it, allows, this is all legal and legit, and we accept that regulatory framework, then how do we navigate this thorny issue of allowing states to regulate this issue themselves, while still allowing, as much as possible, free commerce, free travel, etc. You might say, well, just ban the shipment. Okay, well, how do you enforce that? How do you monitor that? Logically and legally, if you're banning the shipment in order to ban abortion in your state, shouldn't you also try and keep pregnant women in your state, prevent them from traveling to another state? I mean, the simple fact is, if I live in Utah and abortion is banned, and California, it's not banned, a 2-hour plane flight that costs a couple $100 on Southwest takes me to a place where I can then have my abortion and be back on the same day. In other words, the barriers to entry between the states are very, very minimal these days. The world has gotten smaller, more interconnected. And again, this comes back to my point of abortion is a tough and thorny issue, and it's never going to be properly handled at a legislative level. That's the only remedy that we have right now, but it's definitely going to be imperfect. Now I want to dive into this article, and I want to talk a little bit about one of my frustrations with modern journalism, in particular, cable news. Apparently, a Republican congressman was on CNN, and he was being interviewed by Dana Bash, and this issue came up, and he flubbed an answer to a question. Again, as a congressman, he's a professional communicator. He's on the hook for his words, so that's important. But Representative Tony Gonzalez initially responded, looks like he said something like, this should be a states' right issue. And Dana Bash responded by saying, you want this to be a states' rights issue, but there's a federal judge who's saying that on a national level, this drug should be banned. In other words, What's prompting this is that this drug that's been approved by the FDA, that's been used for years, that there's a federal judge that's made a ruling, like an injunction, that said this isn't going to be allowed anymore. Effectively, this judge is choosing to ban this drug on a federal level. So what was a states' rights issue, based on this ruling, now becomes a federal issue again, at least for this method of abortion. To which he responds, women have a lot more other issues than just abortion. Let's have those real conversations. Let's talk about the other things that are happening in this world. That's a dodge. That's crap. That's not good reasoning. It minimizes this issue, which is important and needs to be addressed. What this is really saying is the rep wasn't prepped for that question. He doesn't have a good answer. Maybe he hasn't thought it all the way through. Maybe he's not comfortable issuing his policy position on it. Whatever. This is his choice. This is what frustrates me, though, is this article with The Independent. It references this soundbite 6 times. It's basically the whole article. The article discusses a little bit about mifepristone, gives a little context, and says this is what we're talking about. Mentions that there's a few court cases winding their way, but basically hammers this representative for his soundbite where he looks like a doofus 6 times in one article. This is the problem I have with soundbite journalism. When you're on CNN, when you're on a panel, and you get a thought out there that can be taken out of context, you get a statement that is poorly phrased, and basically the other side goes, "Ha, gotcha." And then they can take and slice and editorialize around it and just hammer and hammer and hammer until your whole side looks atrocious. That's the beauty of owning a media machine, is that you could do that to somebody. That does not foster good faith conversation. That does not foster debate. That does not help us progress forward towards an equitable resolution for this issue. This is a thorny, complicated issue. And it's important. If you believe that abortion is just a medical procedure, then the other side is trying to exercise tyranny and control your body when you're making your own choices about your own body. That's a terrible precedent to set for government overreach of power. On the flip side, if you believe that abortion is murdering an innocent life, then the government is allowing for mass murder. That's also a tragedy, and that's also a terrible precedent. This should not be trivialized by anybody. This is a big deal, and it needs to be dealt with. And there's not really a lot of elegant solutions available here. It's all going to be messy. We live in an imperfect world. Sometimes you got to just lean into the mess. Now, before we close out, I want to talk a little bit about language. For a wonder, I didn't see any egregious reporting language or framing devices. It's actually, other than hammering the soundbite, it's actually fairly well reported. It provides a concise summary of the key facts in motion. It's pretty clear reading between the lines that the reporter is pro-abortion. He uses positive framing in reference to mifepristone, which is the drug that's in question right now. He uses things like, it is considered to be incredibly safe. It's commonly used. It's a treatment for miscarriages. Well, once again, we wind our way forward on this messy situation. We're going to keep talking about abortion. We're going to keep talking about guns. We're going to keep talking about Trump, apparently, for some reason. The world is full of messy weirdness right now. I would encourage you, though, to stay engaged, stay connected, keep talking about these things, and look for ways to make sure that when you're considering these tricky situations, you're doing your best to make sure you've thought all the way through it, that you're looking at information from all sides, that you're as solid as you can be. Because right now is your chance to form your opinion on these topics. The reason why it's important that we learn to rationalize our positions on these tricky, thorny issues is because right now, before you're under pressure, is the time to make these decisions about how you feel about these things and why you believe these things. Before too much longer, for each of us, in our own way, we eventually reach a point where we're under pressure and we have to express and defend our position, and we have to live with the consequences of that decision. As a case in point, when you're a young person, maybe abortion is, just theory, just in principle. It's something that we should talk about, but it's something that affects other people. Okay. Well, what about when you're a little older, you have kids of your own, and your daughter comes to you and she says, hey, I'm 15 and I'm pregnant. Now, your position on abortion matters. You have to ask yourself whether your principles are workable. You have to ask yourself whether you're ready to put your morals to the test. There was a bit of news this week about a young man who was an Uber driver in Texas and was a former Marine, I think. He took a fare and dropped him off near a Black Lives Matter protest. After dropping his fare off, was driving through the crowd, and some chaos ensued. There's conflicting narratives about exactly what happened. But long story short, one of the armed members of the protest was shot by the driver. What do you do when you're in that situation? It's too late to decide how you feel about guns. Let's play that scenario out a couple of different ways. Let's say you had made the decision that you don't ever want to carry a firearm. It's possible that the outcome of that circumstance is that the armed member of the protest shoots you. That happened in Utah right around the same time. Similar protest, member of the crowd walked up to a truck, pointed a gun at the driver, and shot him. This man, this Uber driver, decided that he was going to carry a weapon. He defended himself from the looks of things. He shot him. He's now convicted of murder. He's going to prison. This is in Texas. Very right-leaning. Very Republican-leaning, rather. There's a time to decide how you feel about these tricky, thorny positions, and then there's a time of testing. You won't have the luxury of time or space to decide how you feel about something when a time of testing arrives. So take the time now, dig into these messy issues, decide where you stand, support your decision, research, engage, argue, debate, be as firmly planted in your own principles as you can, so that when the time of testing comes, you'll be ready. That's my Reddit rant and my 2 cents. Good luck out there.